Just a couple of notes before I begin talk tonight. Just want to ask that going forward in the future, if you're going to come tonight on these Tuesdays, that you make sure that you turn your notifications off and leave your phones outside. My preference would be if you turn them off completely. We're all practicing deep awareness and a deep quiet. And some of us have been heavily conditioned to be aware of the sound of bells. So just for the benefit of everybody who's practicing, just collaboratively holding this environment as a place of refuge. Each of us is so inundated every day with so many taxes on our attention. And so I'd really love if we could all work together to make this place a place where we have an opportunity to really settle in to practice to one another, to practice with one another. So just paying a little bit of attention to how our devices and behaviors and bodies are impacting one another, and doing what we can to make that impact beneficial. Thank you. Earlier today, I was reflecting and speaking a little bit about a practice that we have in Zen that mirrors practices in some other traditions. In Zen, the practice is called Sangemon, which has kind of a clunky English translation. I really don't like it because it smells of religion a little too much for me. The translation is often given as repentance. I don't really like that translation. Reconciliation is one that I think is a little bit better, or amendment maybe is another one. And so in the formal practice, in the ceremony of doing Sangemon, there's a verse that we say where we essentially sort of say, all misdeeds, basically, born of my body, speech, and mind, since time out of mind, I acknowledge, I'm recognizing the things that I have done that have caused harm to myself and to others. And the way that I often talk about it is that the one of the practices is, we can say, oh, I'm a jerk because my father wasn't nice to me. Or we can say, I've got crappy attitude towards women because of the culture that I was brought up in. Or we can say, all kinds of things, and we can make it about the experiences that have happened to us being the cause for why we behave in the way that we do. And there's kind of a psychological truth to that in one way. But it's also a practice of accepting responsibility. The Sangha practice is really one of saying, I see that these things have led me to behave in particular ways. And now knowing that, recognizing that, becoming aware of that through practice, through life experience, I'm committing to taking responsibility how I go forward from here. I'm no longer going to pass the responsibility for those things on. While it's true these horrible things may have happened to me, I'm going to turn those into a kind of tool for practice. And going forward, I'm going to be aware of how these things have impacted me, and I'm going to make different choices. I'm going to begin to step forward in new ways to see if I can't just reduce the amount of negative impact I can have in my relationships and in the world. There's another aspect of Sangemon which is very rarely, if ever, really spoken about. And I think years ago I brought a practice into the Zen Center which is really reflecting on our own lives. The experiences that we've had, the circumstances that we've been in, the relationships, environments. And I think everybody, but I'll speak for myself, has things in their lives, circumstances in their lives, relationships that they've had in their lives, where maybe I haven't acted in a really great way. Maybe I didn't treat people in a really great way. Maybe I was unkind or bullying or disrespectful. It goes from the time that I was a child to yesterday. And sometimes we get far enough away from those experiences and those relationships that when we think about them, when they come up, we think, oh, yeah, that still kind of bothers me. I wish I could get over it because it's in the past now. And so in the conversation I was having today, the question came up, is it of value to go back? Is it of value to go back to people that we treated unkindly in the past, to acknowledge the way that we behaved, to apologize for the way that we behaved, and for the harm that we might have caused that person? When I worked at hospice, this was a practice that I did often with people who were terminally ill and family members and friends of people who were terminally ill. Just sitting with people and talking through things that we carry, from small slights to great harms. When we're doing this practice of Zazen, when we sit here and breathe and allow our minds to settle, as the sort of busyness of the superficial, the sort of day-to-day mind starts to settle, it's not uncommon that we start to have sort of uprisings of emotions. As the surface settles, the deeper rhythm, the deeper currents begin to sort of move. And it's not uncommon if we sit for long enough that these old experiences come up. And what I've found is that the longer you live, the more you find that those things that are in the past, they don't just go away. And you can think, oh, that person probably never really thinks about that anymore. Or, oh, it's so far in the past, I really should just let it go. But somehow we don't. So one of the practices that I really recommend, and this is something that you really have to do with some sensitivity and some consideration, is a practice of reconciliation. If there are people with whom you have caused harm, said unkind things, reflect on whether it's possible for you to go back and to speak to that. It's important to really consider, and I don't recommend doing it if by doing so you are going to bring more harm. So that's something that you have to bring into practice to really consider. But chances are there are a few places in our lives that each of us can go back and to acknowledge, to apologize, just to speak about. Sometimes the people that we've caused harm with, or the circumstances or the environments that we want to sort of address, aren't there for us anymore. People die, circumstances kind of dissolve. And in those cases, these are practices that you can do entirely contained within your meditation practice. Bringing those people into your mind, bringing those circumstances alive in your body, and going through the process of doing Sangemon. In Sangemon, the ritual, the full ritual, a practitioner lowers themselves, places their forehead, the sort of highest part of our body, and sort of, neurologically, our forehead is all of that sort of nice, logical, high-functioning stuff. We place it right on the ground, lowering ourselves completely, putting it down, and speaking from our hearts. Genuinely sorry for the things that we've done in the past that have caused harm. Genuinely committing to make the changes so that we don't cause that same kind of harm in the future. It's not out of guilt. It's not out of any sense of sort of like, moral punishment coming your way if you don't. You're not a good or bad person if you do or you don't. For me, it's a quite a practical approach, because what I found is that in my practice, in my life, those places, as I have continued to practice, as I've continued to reflect on my life, I've become more aware of who I truly am as a person. And as that's happened, I become more and more aware of those times in my life where I have behaved and I've acted in ways that are genuinely out of alignment with who I am as a person. There's like bends. And it's almost as if there's like a piece of myself that gets stuck there, that's still holding on to that action, or still holding on to that scene or that moment. And by taking up this practice of Sangemon, of going back as I am today with the knowledge and the wisdom and the experience that I've gained over my life, the practice, I can see that oftentimes the way that I behaved, the things that I said, were coming from a place where I was really doing the best that I could at the time. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I was under-resourced. Maybe I didn't have the knowledge or experience or context to respond in a whole and loving way, and so I did what I did. And in a way, I feel like now I can go back. Part of it is forgiving myself. Part of it is lifting the burden from that part of me that was in that circumstance then, and demonstrating how I can respond more appropriately in a more loving and whole way now. And in that way, it's as if a part of myself comes home. It's as if something that's been stuck or snagged for a long time is liberated and freed. It's as if a burden is lifted. And I've found that doing this practice and going forward having done this practice over and over and over throughout my life, continuing to do this practice, that those uncomfortable memories, they become softer, gentler. Sometimes they've faded completely because it's as if there's something deep inside that resolves, that settles. So this practice that we do, this sitting practice, this meditation practice, on the one hand, yes, it provides us this opportunity to settle our minds in this moment. It allows the day-to-day distraction, the day-to-day busyness, it allows us to sort of put it down and sort of come more presently into the room. But as we do that, you'll become more and more aware of these deeper currents. It's the difference between sort of like the sound of something going on inside of the room, which everybody seems to notice, and the sound of like a notification that's happening out in the hallway. If things become really quiet in the room, you start to notice things that are more subtle. You start to notice things that are further away or that are deeper. And so the practice isn't just to ignore those things, but it's to investigate those things, to unpack those things, to allow them to come to true resolution, dissolution. And it's a practice that I highly recommend also because it feels good long term. So I want to thank you for your practice, and I want to thank you for applying the energy of your life to this investigation. Together, we're stepping into a world that is continuing to change and become more challenging. And each of us will have more and more opportunities to behave in ways that are cruel and unkind, to become more separate, more polarized. We're encouraged every day. And so I'm so grateful that all of you have chosen to come here and engage in this practice that Dogen calls the backward step, this way of turning around, dissolving into, coming together, making relationship, moving in harmony, remembering who we truly are. So thank you. If you've made it this far and you're still listening, you know what to do. Like this episode, leave a comment, share it with one person you feel might benefit from it. Subscribe if you haven't already. It costs you nothing, but it's how this podcast keeps going. Thanks for practicing with me.